Okay, I'm going to ask you guys right now, like and subscribe wherever listening or watching this podcast. That's all I'm asking one time today. We're going to start. I'm going to urge you, if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple or Amazon or wherever you're listening to the podcast, you're going to want to also check out the video version, because we're going to start with Robie, and we're posting the photo right now. When I saw this deer that you shot last year during gun season,
Yes.
I'm like, holy cow, that is one monster buck. Tell us about that deer. This was Illinois, correct?
Yeah, Central Illinois.
So tell me the story. I love to hear stories. I want to hear this story.
It's a deer that I've got about 4 years of history with. He was nocturnal. He was actually traveling about 9 miles.
My gosh.
2 days before I harvested him, he was actually 7 miles away on another farm. We got trail camera pictures of him.
7 miles?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Now, this would have been, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but this is Eastern Illinois.
Yes.
Is that, I'm not super familiar with Eastern Illinois. I've hunted Illinois a lot down by Steve's. Is that wide open farmland also?
Starting to get into the rolling hills.
Okay.
Where I am at, it is just small tracts of timber in the middle of 300-400 acres of ag all around. Then you get about 10 miles south, and you get into the big hollers.
So 7 miles. How did that deer live for that many years?
We have no idea.
I mean,
He
other
was
hunters
everywhere.
Wow.
And a lot of hunters knew about him. As soon as I shot him, and then when I put him on social media, I had people sending me trail pictures from all different directions of that
How
deer.
amazing is that? What was the farthest from like where you shot him?
9 miles.
9 miles. Oh,
Yep.
somebody else got a trail camera
Yes.
photo of him.
Yep.
Over a course of 4 years.
Yes, mostly was the last 2 years was when he was traveling his most.
Did you ever get a crack at him during bow season?
No.
No.
Nope.
Ever see him during bow season?
Never.
Really?
No, he was always running nocturnal. But I got a big ravine in my property that is actually not real wide. It's deep. And I stayed out of there because I thought that's the way he was coming, because it's the only place I didn't have a camera, and I knew he had to be getting to the bedding area either across the field or from there. And I just stayed out of there till the opening morning. I got in about an hour early, and 30 minutes after daylight, he came following 6 does right down to me.
Wow, what a hunt. Did you put a tape to him?
He's right at the 174 and 5/8.
So he's, we call him a booner. That's
he's 24 inches wide inside.
Congrats, that is an awesome buck. Awesome buck. Guys, check that photo out. He is Robie Pruitt. I am Dan Schmidt. Thank you for joining us for Deer Talk Now. You can watch these podcasts or listen to them every Thursday, wherever you can drop a podcast. I mentioned the platforms or the video versions, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Robie is a product specialist for Antler King. You've worked there for many years. Today, we're actually, I would love to talk about big bucks all day, but we're going to talk about food plots, because that is your expertise. You've done this for how many years?
Well, I've been food plotting for 38 years. I've been with Antler King family for 23.
23 years. Yeah. So you know Todd very well.
Very well.
You've seen that company basically start from the ground and all the way up, and one of the top food plot companies in the country.
Yes. Yep.
I know you have specialties. There's questions that I have specifically for you. This time of year, Ian, when are we dropping this?
Oh, this should be in like August.
Okay, so it's still time. Now we have a lot of Midwestern listeners, deer and deer hunting fans from all across the country, but also Southern listeners and watchers. One thing that I get a lot of questions on, and I'm by no means any expert on this, but I get a lot of questions on clover when guys start. And the thing that I always say, and correct me if I'm wrong, best time to start clover is in spring.
Exactly.
So can a guy, if he's out there now, we're looking at summer, late summer, is it worth your time to try clover, or do you wait until next year?
There's two ways to look at that. I highly recommend planting it in the spring, so I have the most growth out of it for that first fall. If you ever want to plant clover and not worry about a real messy, weedy type plot like you do in the spring, because your first year clover is always the ugliest clover. All the weeds and grasses are coming in while them clovers are germinating. When you do plant it in the fall, you don't have as much of a weedy mess. You won't have as much growth there for that first fall, but the next spring it just explodes.
It takes over.
Yeah, so you can do it either or. I just like having the most that first year, so I always do a spring planting, then I maintain it.
Would you still recommend clover, though, for somebody who wants to try it? Like you said, you just don't, I guess, rein back your expectations. if you want to try to start it yet this year?
If you want to start it this year, I just tell the people to make sure you plant it the same time you would your fall plots.
Okay.
You don't want to try to plant it in the dead heat of the summer. If you can't, like in Midwest where I'm at, I always say if I can't plant it by June 1st, I'm waiting until about August 15th before I plant it.
That's excellent. I'm actually writing that down. If you can't do it by June 1st, wait till August 15th. And we've done that by default, basically because we couldn't get anything to grow in summer.
Exactly.
Or you just put in all that work and it's marginal at best.
Right.
As far as weeds for clover, what's your approach? How do you try to manage weeds?
I like trying to manage them as best I can with a mowing method. So I will try. Now, if you get a spot that they're just overgrown, I'm using herbicides. I'm using a select herbicide. I'll run clethodim for a grass killer, and then I'll run 2,4-DB for a broadleaf killer. Them two products there, a lot of people get confused because they think they can mix them together and kill the weeds and the grass at the same time. It just puts too much stress on the clover. So I always say, make sure you spray them 7 days apart. Now, if you're on a time crunch and you can only get to a property that's 3 hours away or whatever every so often, you can buy a product called IMOX, and IMOX will kill the grass and the weeds out of it, but you're going to pay for it.
Oh, it's pretty expensive.
Very expensive.
And actually, those other ones are pretty expensive.
They are expensive, yes.
But you're basically what you're saying is if see what you got, grass or broadleaf. Here we have I think it's actually called broadleaf plantain.
Yep.
A ton of that.
Yep.
I have that in I've planted some roads. I haven't never tried to spray it.
Right.
I do try to mow. Now, what is the technique that you recommend for mowing?
I like spraying my plots about minimum a week before I'm going to mow them. So I'll spray them. It's going to absorb into that root system. Then I'll get in and mow, and then the clovers will just start coming up. The weeds and grasses are already stunned, so they're not going to grow no more. And them clovers just outgrow everything.
If you have clover established and it's pretty decent, do you still employ mowing?
Yes. I mow every time that my clover flowers.
Okay.
Anytime clover matures, you want to mow that plot.
So it just basically keeps bringing it back?
It's probably one of the biggest things that there's arguments about all the time. When clover is actually matured and it flowers, it is at its lowest protein rate. So, and that's only for certain clovers. Not all clovers are that way, but certain clovers like the ones we use, it's at its lowest protein rate. So by cutting that plant, it is actually turning that plant from its dormancy to the growing, and it raises the protein level back up. Even though the deer are out there hitting it, and you got white flowers everywhere, and the deer are hammering it, and you're like, I ain't going to touch it. They're not eating as high as protein as what they could as if you do mow it and let it get growing again.
Okay, that's really interesting. One thing that I find interesting is I haven't paid enough attention to the deer, but I raise rabbits.
Oh yeah,
and they'll eat the clover like crazy. But once it gets that older stage, they'll start eating. I bring them all sorts of weeds. I just want to see what they're going to eat.
Absolutely.
And they'll eat that clover, but not as readily. And
exactly.
I bet you that's probably a reason why.
It's not as sweet. Yep.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Now, tell me about Antler King clover specifically. What strains are in that?
You know, we actually have a few different ones. We like running our Ladinos or a Sisk. We're running some reds, some whites. And and we got a couple other ones that we run for like more of our shaded type areas, like in our Game Changer clover, that will grow in sun or shade. Where like our trophy mix, our trophy clover mix, it needs a good 6 to 7 hours of sunlight a day.
Okay.
So if you plant that in a backwoods plot, you'll never hardly get growth about that tall out of it because it just needs that sunlight. Where the Game Changer, with the specialty clovers in them, they will just explode and grow like crazy.
Is that a difference between white and red clovers as far as what grows, what's shade tolerant and what isn't?
Whites and reds both of them actually will grow kind of either or. The more sun, even though they're a shade tolerant, the more the sun that they can get, the better and healthier the plants will be, and the more tonnage you will receive. But some clovers will just not grow in a shaded area, like your Ladinos, stuff like that.
Well, let me ask you that, because that's one thing that maybe I've been thinking wrong over the years is, what would you suggest for shaded? I'm talking like logging road areas that they don't get a lot of direct sunlight. Some
right.
Is clover still your best bet, or would you suggest something else?
I still like running like our Game Changer clover. That's by far you're getting about 4 good years of growth out of one bag. Now with us, we do have an annual mix. I love the annuals as a fall planting, not a spring planting. The clovers you can do spring or fall. The no sweat, which is an annual, it does have one perennial clover in it. You can plant it only in the fall.
Okay.
So if you're looking at more of an attraction, say, hey, I want to just get in here and just have a spot to hunt over this fall, I would go with the no sweat with the annuals mixed in with it. That will grow in that shaded area. But if you just want a good food source to hunt over and have for the deer all through the summer, that game changer is the way to go.
What are some of the other forages that are like in no sweat?
You'll actually have your rape in there. You will have some ryegrass, which a lot of people look at ryegrass as kind of being a bad thing. But ryegrass will actually pump out almost 28% protein.
Wow.
So
that's pretty high.
And it's a lot of people don't realize that. So when it's in its growing state, it is very high in protein, and that's why the deer, like the clover, you'll see them hitting it hard through its growing stage. But as soon as it matures out and starts to head out, that's when you start seeing them lay off of it. And that's where good mowing comes involved too.
Does mowing help ryegrass? I don't know that.
Absolutely.
It does.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's helping that out. That's excellent stuff. I'm learning a lot as we go here. Okay, so we talked about clover. There was actually 3 topics I wanted to get to with you here today. Best spot. Well, let me just finish that up. So we'll go through the top 3 things. Best spot to put clovers, obviously, then somewhere that you're going to get sunlight.
Yes.
You can use it in these other areas, but ideally, you've got a plot that's getting more than half a day's worth of sunlight.
Right.
Okay, number 2, we talked about what works against clover. That would mostly be your weeds or grass. Would it be your broadleaf weeds or your grasses?
Truthfully, it's going to depend. And certain plots I have more trouble with grasses than I do broadleafs. Other one is the opposite. So it just really depends on what the seed base is stored in your soil.
Where you're at.
Yep.
One obvious thing I didn't ask is what is an ideal pH for clover?
Well, with anything that you plant, that neutral 7.0 is where you want to be, just so then plants can utilize all the fertilizer you put on.
Okay.
But like with the trophy clover, a 6.0 to a 7.0 is going to grow great. The game changer clover, the more shaded type area, we've actually tested it down to that 4.5 and it got good growth and tonnage out of it. Yeah.
So that is good for some of those hard to reach.
Them shaded backwoods, logging roads,
hard to reach
like
areas that you can't get,
Yes.
I suppose you could take pelleted lime or something like that.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
We're actually going to get to that in a minute. But so we went through that. Okay, now let's talk about the other topic. I actually asked all my followers on Twitter these questions, and this is where these came in.
Okay.
I want to know specifically about kill plots. Now, when we're talking kill plots, we're talking small little food plots.
Yep.
Probably the same kind of situation, hard to reach areas. Or you might have a guy with a small property where it's like, I only got a 1/4 acre that I can till up because there's stumps and everything else.
Right.
What forage types would you use? I'm assuming this is the same thing we're looking at for most of the listeners. If we're going to include the South, it would probably be pushing that much past August. But out in August planting for a small plot, what would be your go-to forage types?
Up here where you guys are at up here, and even where I'm at too, I get a cool enough weather that I love my brassicas, like our honey hole mix with the turnips and the rape. You get farther south, that's where you're getting more into like your collard greens, like our southern green mix that has the collard green is the only brassica that does not need a frost to turn it sweet. Where your turnips, your radishes, stuff like that need that frost to turn that plant sweet and the bulb sweet. And it also needs a good pH in the soil to do it as well. So a lot of people have issues with a turnip or a radish. They look beautiful, but the deer won't eat them. Usually it's because your pH level is too low and they never turn sweet. That starch will never turn to sugar.
That's interesting.
So, but no, I mean, as in a kill plot, you cannot beat the brassica plots. I mean, as long as you got cool weather, you cannot beat a good turnip radish.
And your timing for that, is there I know you can't plant it too early, but the problems I've had in the past was when I've done that, our bow season comes in like second week of September. I've gotten them in where that thing was just completely hammered down by the time bow season came in.
Yes.
So you kind of got to look at that. How many weeks would you say if you want to time that with your archery season?
Usually you're looking, a lot of these plants are like a 60-day maturity. So you always want to look at a brassica variety that you never want the plant to mature out prior to the first frost. You want it to be in its growing state, because if it matures out, the longer it stays matured out, the stemmier it gets, and it's not as palatable. So with me, I'm always planting mine just because of our weather in Illinois where I'm at. August 1st to the 15th, if we got moisture, they're going in the ground. I can plant them up to a little after Labor Day, no problem at all, and still have good growth and good bulbs out of them. But usually with us, anything that we have, you look on the bag, it's going to tell you the maturity rate in it. So you just kind of judge from there thinking, well, our first frost usually hits here. We don't want to get it planted in June because it's way too early. Let's wait till August or end of July. A lot of times up in here when I was in the Black River Falls area, I was planting usually that third weekend of July is when I was planting usually. But it just depends on Mother Nature.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Moultrie Mobile. The all-new feed hub from Moultrie Mobile is a remote game feed manager that's compatible with all major feeders. Remotely check feed levels, schedule feeding times, and instantly dispense feed directly from the Moultrie Mobile app. For more information, go to moultriemobile.com. What would you give this advice for guys even farther south, guys? You start getting down into Tennessee and Alabama and some of those places. What kind of window would they be looking at?
You're looking at October, that first part of October to mid-October. That's where a lot of my guys are planting down there. And a lot of the stuff they're planting too is not going to be a cold weather brassica. They're going to be planting more of the collard greens, winter wheat, oats, cereal rye, stuff like that. That's going to grow good for them.
Fabulous results with that. I've hunted down there in Alabama, and some of those plots are just amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely amazing.
Yep.
Another question related to that is how much, if you can, is there a magical percentage of how much property you should be able to plant? That if you've got 100 acres or 40 acres, is it 10%? Is it more than that?
If you're looking to get the best out of your property, we highly recommend 5 to 10%. So if you're looking to get the best nutritional value, now that means food plots, if you can run minerals, the whole 9 yards, that's going to give them deer exactly what they need. But if you can run minerals, stuff like that, 5% you're good. If you can't run any minerals or supplemental feeding, I like doing about 10%. And then you look at what you're feeding. You want to make sure they have protein in the spring, summer, and energy in the fall and winter. So you got to make sure you plant the right things for them to get that out of it.
That's a key point, everybody, because a lot of guys will look at it, myself included. You look at it and you put in this work and you say, oh, I got this great food plot. Well, the more I learned about it, thanks to Steve Bartilla, is like I put a Snickers bar out there for him because, I mean, 10%, if you have 100 acres, that's 10 acres.
Exactly.
That's a lot of food.
That's hard to do.
But they need that. I mean, like,
they need it.
Like you said, if you put in a little kill plot that's 20 yards wide by 40 yards long, well, that's not going to go very far.
No, it does not.
And I mean, you might get some hunting out of it, but to quote Steve again, to try to keep deer to spend a disproportionate amount of time on your property,
right?
You really got to think in that bigger picture.
You have to, yeah.
So that's where, if you have the ground, if it's tillable, that's awesome. If you don't, well, then you consider, can I clear some spots? Yeah. And that is a plan that you can't just execute, snap your fingers overnight.
Right. And I had an old man tell me one time before, he said, Rob, a deer is just like you are. If you come home and you open your fridge and there's nothing in it, you're going to go elsewhere to go eat. A deer is going to do the same thing to your property. So the more food you can give them deer, the more they're going to stay on there. Great quote.
What about, I know you're focused on food plots. Do you do anything with orchards, apple trees, anything like that down by you?
I don't, because the deer destroy them. Now, I have some mature trees that have already been on the farms, but as in planting, I don't. With me having the home farm, I can do more on, but my farm that we actually shoot the deer off of is only 28 acres of woods and then a 12-acre hayfield. So that's all I have to deal with there, and that's just my honey hole. And so I pretty much, everything I can give the food, I put it in food, and I don't put trees in it. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the trees do very well, especially fruit trees, chestnuts, they do very, very well.
I think another point that you made there is I love it because I live there.
Exactly.
If you live there, it is babysitting
yes.
that requires trees. It's something that you can't be 3 hours away.
No.
You can't take care of them there.
Yep.
Okay, let's move. We're clipping along here. The third topic By the way, if you guys want to read, he's got tons of videos on their YouTube page, Antler King. I think it's antlerking.com.
.com.
And then there's tons of videos and articles that Robie has written. He's actually done them for us too, for deer and deer hunting. Tons of great information. Seed preparation. This was actually a question. I can't remember who asked me. I was going to give him a shout out, and I can't remember who asked me this. I don't have a cultipacker. Now what?
Well, the early days with me, when I realized how important it was to cultipack your soil and seed on a firm seed bed. If you had an ATV, I've done it with an ATV, I've done it with a garden tractor, I've done it with a tractor. I will literally work my soil, and then I will tire track the plot in. Now, you get 6-7 acres, that's a different story. But if you're having a smaller area, you can just take it back and forth and just pack that in, throw your seed down, and do it right back again.
So run it over twice.
Run it over twice. And I always like running one way, and then after I seed, I'll run it the other way just so you can see where you've been.
Crisscross.
Yes.
Do you do that with all seed types?
I do.
Okay. So even, the small seeds, obviously, a brassica seed, tiny.
Yes.
A clover seed, tiny. But what about like something like a bigger seed, like a pea or something like that?
A pea, you can get a pea a little deeper. But with the cultipacker, I have had very good success, as in just broadcast them on that firm seed bed and going over them. The issue I have is it's not ground, it is turkeys. That's the issue. If you have a lot of turkeys in the area, it's best to get them covered up, even with a light harrow or something that you can flip over upside down and get a little bit more dirt over them. But just don't go crazy on it, because you will. I've actually tried broadcasting them without packing the soil first, and then go back over and pack it, and it pushes them way too deep.
Okay.
So I just go with packing them. That long as the turkeys leave them alone. But most time planting peas, unless you got a big area, they'll never get that tall anyway, because the deer just nip them off.
Yep.
So it's just some of our mixes have peas in them, more for like a nurse crop. And so I do plant them that way with our other varieties, but actually planting peas alone, or soybeans, I don't, because I don't have, if I can't plant 3 acres of them, I'm not going to plant them alone, just because the deer will destroy them before they ever grow up.
Soybeans especially, they just absolutely. I haven't dabbled with peas, but soybeans,
pretty much the same.
Absolutely destroy them. Placing in, this question was, what are your tips or suggestions for establishing food plots in newly cleared areas?
What I like to do, and I know his is already newly cleared, but make sure before you even do anything with that food plot that you can actually hunt over it or next to it. A lot of people will build a food plot not realizing the prevailing winds, and all of a sudden it's time to go hunting, and they realize they can't get in now there without booger and deer. So make sure that you can actually use that plot for a kill plot if that's what you're wanting to do. Now, a food plot, if you're not going to ever hunt over a food plot, you can just put it anywhere.
Right.
But on the kill plot, make sure that's there. When I build a food plot, I always like making it like a teardrop, especially a kill plot, so I can always have a pinch point that no matter what deer walks through there, I can shoot across it. So I'll have my bigger ends on both ends, and I'll have it funneled down in the center, and it'll give you a shot opportunity.
That's what we're doing right now.
We're
putting on Ian's. We're doing that actually right now. That's on my property where I'm doing that. And the point you made about hunting it, I'm going to give a shout out to Jay, my buddy here from local buddy. This is many years ago when we were putting in my first food plot, which we actually featured that on DDH TV a few years back. Jay's first question was, "Where do you want to kill your deer?"
Yep.
And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Before we do this, where do you?" And it was all high goldenrod and everything.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, that's actually a really good question.
Very good.
To me, it was like having a blank canvas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Because the prevailing wind here normally is like northwest.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I can't have a spot. I can't put a blind here because everything's going to smell me coming in.
Yep.
And we designed it that way, and it worked out great.
That's
but that
perfect.
is a perfect point. What about like we're talking about a newly cleared area. You're going in and you're brush hogging. It might be berry brush or something like that. Yeah, you've got to try to get all that, they call it duff, off the top of the ground, all the roots and vines and all that stuff. Is there anything that you do? Do you spray that, or you just try to rip it out of there, or what do you do?
I always spray, and I got away from using glyphosate just because most of my plants are getting immune to it. So I go with a Liberty. Liberty makes a very good herbicide that will just knock it all dead. All the floor rows you sprayed on it is gone.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's some good stuff, and it's noticeable within about 3 days.
Wow.
So, and it's not hardly any more expensive than Roundup.
So you go in and you spray it, and then you brush hog it?
I'll let it go and let it start. As soon as I start seeing it turn, then I'll brush hog it down.
Okay.
Yep. Now, if I got real tall, nasty stuff, I will usually cut first. And then with mine, I actually have a side discharge on one of my pull behinds. So I will blow it out, start in the center, blow out, and then get most of that thatch off there. And then I'll come in and spray it.
Good point. Good point. All right. Let's see. I think we got 2 more questions for you here. You talked about amending the soil before. Traditional thinking always has been, okay, we're going to try to get that pH up through lime, and then we're going to fertilize, and then we're going to plant. Is that still the way to go?
Yeah,
it is.
When you go to build a plot or plant a plot, I will not plant unless I do a pH test kit. I will not do it. I got to know what that pH is. The pH of the soil is going to determine how much money you're actually throwing away or the plants are utilizing. So you look at a 5.5 pH in the soil, then plants can only utilize about 72% of that. So the rest of that's just money thrown down the drain. So the days of hearing people say, I'm not checking my pH, I'm not adding lime, I'm just adding more fertilizer. Well, you're just throwing money away when you do that. So that little test, no matter if you buy one of our test kits or if you go to a co-op for $10, that will make or break a plot.
Do you do your test on those plots every year?
Every year.
And what kind of differences do you see?
Depending on what you're planting. Clovers, alfalfas, soybeans, peas, you don't see a lot. You'll see a point or two down. Brassicas, they destroy it. Within 3 years, brassica will completely suck dry every nutrients in the soil. So that's why it's good to rotate them with something like a clover, alfalfa, something like that. So, I mean, I can drop from a 6.8 in a honey hole brassica plot to about a 5.2, 5.3 with a good growing season. They will suck them dry.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, this is just for my information. What does corn do to the soil?
Oh, it sucks it dry.
It does.
It's nitrogen. Yep, it loves it. It just sucks
that's
them
one
dry.
thing I've always said to anybody who would listen to me. I'm like, you cannot plant corn every single year.
That's why you rotate with soybeans, because soybeans will actually put nitrogen back in the soil.
Yeah, and that's kind of that would be, you're saying, is that's similar with brassicas then? That's
similar with brassicas. So that's why I do it every 2 years, but I tell people you got 3. You can do 3 years, but you always want to rotate that. So if you're lucky enough to have 2 plots, do a brassica plot and a clover plot. Every 3 years, flip-flop them, because the clovers are actually going to suck the nitrogen in from the atmosphere and store it in the soil. So it's helping build that soil while they're feeding the deer. So, and then you got all that nitrogen build up for the 3 years of having this clover plot over here. So when you plant them brassicas in there, they just explode.
What winter wheat puts it back in, doesn't it?
Winter wheat does too. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good on that one then.
Oh yeah.
I did on my big plot last year was mostly winter wheat.
Yep.
It got really super high, and I just kind of laid it all down.
Yep.
Tilled it in. All right, let's see what we got here for you. Well, then what's the increasing interest in foliars then? The sprays that you're putting on the plants.
As in the foliar fertilizers?
Yes.
The foliar fertilizers, you look at, like, we have our Jolt for our nitrogen-based plants, like our annuals. We have our Clover Fuel for the clover. You want to use a fertilizer just like a granular. You want to make sure that you're using a fertilizer that you're not feeding the weeds and grasses. So like the Clover Fuel is 0028. Clovers only need potash. They don't need nitrogen because they produce their own or suck in their own. So if you put, let's just say you go out there and put our Jolt on, or if you put on, let's go get some granular 1010, that nitrogen is going to feed the weeds and grasses that you have in your clover plot and make them explode. So that's why you have such a weedy mess. So you want to make sure you use the proper foliar fertilizer or granular fertilizer for the plot. But with, like, you get more like in, let's say, a drought situation coming on, like our Clover Fuel. You start seeing that clover get a little brown dots on it, starting to curl a little bit. You're not getting moisture to actually go put granular down to break it down from the absorb in. So that's where the foliars come in good. It helps that plant stay healthier longer, even though it's in a drought type situation. And the Jolt is a nitrogen base, but you cannot burn the plant with the jolt like you could if you went out and threw urea down on that with granular. You can burn that plant with no moisture. The liquid foliar will not do that.
Interesting stuff, man. Where did you learn all this?
No,
Trial and error.
Yeah, I live and breathe it. Yeah.
This is how I am with apple trees. That's why I
Yeah.
asked you that question before. I am not that way with food plots, but I know how, and I don't have enough land to do it, but I know how guys really get into it, because it's kind of a labor of love.
Yeah, it's an addiction.
When you
Yep.
see that stuff grow, it's not so much, I mean, yeah, we're killing deer and we're having fun and we're
Yeah.
seeing turkeys and stuff, but it's just getting that plant to grow. It's the same thing with growing vegetables in the garden.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's an interesting point you made about, I can't remember which forage, but Charlie Alsheimer used to talk about that when he was talking. You're talking about pH levels.
Mm-hmm.
He would basically say a tomato's not a tomato. He'd say the tomato in the store versus your tomato you grow in the ground. He said whatever that soil is.
Yep.
He said you might be looking at two nice red tomatoes, but the one is much more healthy for you because it took in
Yep.
more nutrients.
Yes.
Out of the soil. And
Absolutely.
It's the
Same thing with
same thing with all these forages.
Yep.
Okay, last question. Pros and cons of no-till.
Oh, they all have their place. Are we talking no-till drilling, or are we talking just no-till seeds?
Just no-till seeds.
No-till seeds. I mean, they all have their. You can make the most beautiful plot ever with a still rake and some no-till seed, like our no-till mix, our no sweat, our game changer clover. I still to this day on logging roads and four-wheeler trails use a still rake and broadcast it in. They grow in low shaded areas, and I mean they work very, very well. So somebody that doesn't have the equipment, and even if you're not working in the backwoods, let's just say our honey hole mix is one of our premium varieties. It's our number one selling since 1987, or well, actually 88 when it came out. That is a premium mix, but you can still use that in a no-till spot as long as you got the sun. So if you have an open area out somewhere and you don't have a tractor to work the ground, if you're man enough to go out there as a still rake and scuff it up, you can plant a premium mix as a no-till. Best to do it prior to a rain, but you can still use a premium mix. You don't have to buy what we call no-till and other people call throw and grow. You can buy a premium one as long as you have the sun hitting it. Certain ones will grow as a no-till.
Same thing with that. Steel rake, get the seed out and run it over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you can do it. I've done it. I mean, it works, and I've shot deer in places where I never thought I would see any.
And a lot of times, too, if you find, like my logging roads, what I'll actually do, I'll just take the steel rake and just pretty much groove it. I'll just bust it up a little bit on top. I'll broadcast it right before a rain. I won't even run over it, nothing. I just let it go.
It kind of sucks. It's
It sucks it right
almost like a frost seeding
Yes.
situation where that soil just sucks
Yeah,
it
it
in.
sucks it right in.
Let's talk about the Antler King seed for a minute, because you did mention that. How is it different? How is it a premium seed? Do you source that from other places, or how does that work?
Now, when it comes to that, you're using premium seeds, but where I really get premium at is how we mix them and how we test them to make sure each thing grows together. So when you get like a no-till mix, you're going to have a few seeds in there that are going to grow well. I mean, they're not something that you're going to have a catalog picture cover, for, but now, if you take like the honey hole or our grade 8, that, the grade 8 took us 4 years of testing before we'd ever put on the market.
That stuff is pretty awesome, by the way.
Just because they would compete with each other and starve each other for nutrition, and some of the varieties would die out on it. So we can't sell nothing like that. So that's where I call more of a premium variety. And another way with premium is the amount of tonnage that you're going to get out of it. No sweat. Let's just say you did a half acre of no sweat. You're probably going to average ton and a half of forage on a very good growing season, where a honey hole, you're going to be up there in that 8 to 9 ton. I mean, it's a big difference of forage. So that's kind of the premium part. You're using good seeds, you're mixing them the proper way, and you're getting the most tonnage out of them.
What's the downside of overseeding?
The plants starve each other for nutrition.
Just too much in there.
Yep. You cannot put enough fertilizer down to do it. They will continue to starve themselves for nutrition.
So just be very careful with that.
Very
Read the
careful.
bag, and you don't need a lot.
No, and I always tell people, if you don't think you're putting enough down, you already put 3 times too much down with a broadcaster.
That's me. I'm always been
Yep.
guilty of that.
Yep.
Throw another bag in there. More's got to be better, right? No, you're.
Yep. A few years ago, I actually did a test at the house where I did a clover plot, a trophy clover plot. It was probably a 100-yard strip, about 50 yards wide. I did 2 of them side by side, about 50 yards apart from each other. And one I did with the same pH, But one of them, I put an acre's coverage on it, and the other one, I put the half-acre coverage on. And I wish I had the picture here now because it was night and day difference on how them, from germination to how that one started growing up, got about 6 inches tall, turned yellow, and started laying over dying. People just don't understand it until they can see it.
That's because the plants are growing real close.
They're growing too close, and there's not enough nutrients in that soil for them to live off of.
If I could give you an example right now as my vegetable garden, I put down way too many radish seeds, and they're all growing in there. And I usually get on my hands and knees and pluck them out, you know.
Right.
And I've done this. I've vegetable garden for many, many years. And if you want nice big radishes, they got to be about that far apart.
Exactly.
And I just kind of was in a hasty hurry, and I've got way too many in there now, and they're only about that high.
Exactly.
That's a good example there.
Yep.
Well, he is Robbie. Thank you so much.
Hey, you're very welcome. I appreciate
it so
it.
much. He is Robie Pruitt. He is a product specialist for Antler King, a partner of Deer and Deer Hunting for a long time. Check out his information and their products at antlerking.com. Until next week, we will join you for another episode. Make sure you're downloading these wherever you're listening to podcasts or watching them, and please like and share. For Robie Pruitt, I am Dan Schmidt. Thank you for watching us for another episode of Deer Talk Now.